Chris, just a few hours later now, can you just reflect on this season? What kind of stands out to you about the journey of this and maybe how it ended?
Yeah, honestly, I can't really, John, at this point. It's tough. I mean, there's certainly good points in it, things that we set out to accomplish at the beginning of the season. I think Jaden's growth was one thing that was a stated goal of ours. An emergent Dante. Trying to build on our continuity, which I'm not sure we did a great job there. Offensively, we were outside the top 10. That's not really acceptable for us. Defensively, outside the top 5, not really acceptable for us. So it's a mixed bag right now. These seasons are long. They throw up a lot of adversity. Some of it we handled well, some of it we didn't. Proud of us down the stretch when it mattered in the playoffs, trying to overcome a lot of things from a personnel standpoint. So it's really hard to kind of right on the heels of the season to really kind of put a grade on it. So we'll do that. We'll sift through the wreckage. The wheels came off. There's no doubt about that, and we're disappointed with that. Not a big fan of getting beat by 33 times in a series. That's certainly nothing to be proud of. But so it's just a lot to try to kind of digest right now. But they were the better team, and having said that, we still look at the totality of where we are as a program. One of the only 2 teams that's been to this point in the playoffs in the last 3 seasons. So, we just got to keep trying to take swings and get better.
Do you think there will require some sort of changes offensively in terms of what you are asking these players to do, or having the players to fit the system that you want to run?
Probably a little bit of both. I do think it's time. We got to keep tweaking the offense around the players. I think this year, obviously, there's some original sin that was created. I'm flipping Ant to the point guard spot just on the eve of the season. Probably, it certainly helped with Dante, but it kind of hurt. Probably didn't put everybody in the best position there, Ant included. But he had really good moments there, and I think it was good for him overall. But it maybe affected us as a team a little bit more. It kind of threw off the rhythm and style at which we had been playing. So that kind of ate into continuity. So you had conflicting goals here. So that's just being honest. So got to look at everything. Certainly going to be a big evaluation summer.
To piggyback on that a little bit, the process at the beginning of the preseason, you were pretty sure that Mike was going to be the starter and, mainstream. And part of it was getting Ant more involved, but part of it is dealing with Mike and then feeling with Dante. How did that play out during the preseason? Because it seemed to be a really abrupt decision.
It was abrupt decision, fairly abrupt decision. It was something that I made fairly unilaterally. I did talk to Ant and Mike and all the key stakeholders. They were all on board. It was also in an effort to try to preserve Mike, but it hurt Mike's ability to find any kind of consistency throughout the season. And then, of course, we had, the mission of trying to play some of the younger guys too. And all that stuff didn't, seem to be compatible in real time. And that kind of set us back a little bit. And it set everybody back. I think, Mike wasn't able to, like we talked about, wasn't able to find consistency. And the young guys, probably were put in a position where they were kind of asked to do too much right away, or too much was asked of them in that role. So, so I think it was again my decision on the eve of the season, and I thought I went with my gut, and the primary thing was we needed a really good Dante, and we got that. So, but it did come with costs and things we were able to try to navigate throughout the season.
Chris, what's the balance with all of this when you're trying to contend for a championship and like trying to get young guys more minutes, trying to preserve Mike, but knowing that you have to have some of your best guys in a rhythm when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's been very clear. And the Thunder series and then this one, that like the team only really functions when Mike's out there just because of how he executes and everything. So what is the balance of trying to get everybody else up to speed, but knowing maybe the guys who you still have to rely on when it gets to this time of year?
You know, when you're trying to, win a championship or play at the very top of the league, there really are no meaningless minutes. I think that's the thing that there's sometimes this feeling or this mantra that you can just like award minutes or give minutes. Like there's not, especially in the West, is so tough. 2 wins separates, the home court from the play-in game or something like this. So you feel that pressure all through the season. I think it does inhibit some growth when you have these kind of parallel goals. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, and it's I think for us we've just got to find some guys like obviously like Mike, try to replace what he brings us. We just need more connective tissue that can kind of bridge the gap between the high-end talent that we have and also the experience that we need. And of course those guys that the Ants and the Nas's and Jaden's and all those guys that they're now very experienced in the playoffs, but we just have to have guys who can help them be the best version of themselves. So,
Chris, Nas had just kind of a unimaginable start to the season, and then dealing with injuries. Just, I guess, in totality, like how would you assess Nas's ceiling and how he growed this season?
I think Nas's season was actually a bright spot for us, and I'm really glad that he finished on a high note, playing so well in the playoffs. In this series in particular, the one thing I love about Nas, and it's held true every single season, is that he always finds a way to make an impact and carve out a role. And I mean, we know what his role is on our team, but he always finds a way to kind of go with the flow. And everybody will have kind of rough patches during the season, but he always comes out of it, and then always ends up spurring us on to some of the best basketball that we can play. So,
Chris, seems like through Ant's 6 seasons here, every year his role kind of shifts, maybe subtly or more abruptly. This year was maybe one of the more abrupt changes with him being on the ball, kind of being the point guard this season. Just what have you learned about maybe what it's going to take moving forward to really maximize all the things that he does well, and maybe some of the personnel you may need around that?
yeah, I think I think we learned that, like all star players, they're going to have the ball in their hands a lot, but I think he needs help in that we can't just burden him with having to make decisions and create for everybody else as well as himself. I think he can do that much better from the off-ball spot while still have some primary ball handling responsibilities. Ball's going to be in his hands. I mean, if you look at offense in the league right now, the natural point guard isn't there. Many teams don't have one, so their best players have the ball and initiate offense in some way. But Ant's a hardwired scorer. And like his, that's what he needs. That's what he does. That's what he does best. And we need to be able to set him up better. And I think his 3-point volume was down because we weren't able to kind of get him off the ball in situations where he could benefit from what was going on in the offense, et cetera. And likewise, his kick-out rate was down because, he was trying to score almost every single time he got to the paint. And, we needed those kickouts. So it was a little bit of a yin and yang there. So that's one thing we learned through this season with him. We just need as much like toughness and connective tissue. That's what you're going to hear me say all summer, and that's kind of going to help everybody. So.
Chris, I remember a couple years ago, I think it was at this, I asked you about shooting and spacing, and you talked about the importance of ball handling,
Yeah.
kind of being bigger than that. And thinking about your roster this season without the classic sort of point guard, and then a front court that doesn't have a ton of shooting, does that kind of, in your view, make ball handling the biggest thing that this team needs going forward?
You do. I think ball handling, playmaking, ball skill. It's more valuable than ever in the league right now because it's been a great way to counter all the switching that you see. I mean, San Antonio is a good example in that they have a handful of guys who can just put their head down, play with strength, get to their spot, and finish. And that there's not a lot of creativity in that. Like all credit to them, they're very, very good at it, and they certainly kicked our butt doing it. But it's a pretty simple plan of attack, and we don't. We need more guys that can do that and get to a spot and make a play, and it may be not necessarily for just themselves, but also for the benefit of the offense. So I think that's just like the way the game is played now, and we had our best success in this series when we were able to put TJ and Io and Ant out there, multiple guys who can just handle the pressure, get to the heart of the defense, and make the play. And we didn't necessarily make enough shots, but that was kind of what we needed. Now, we have other things we have bigs, we have Julius, we have Nas, these guys have long been a part of our identity, and that's what we have to play to their strengths too. So when you get to the playoffs, you got to be able to try to win different ways, and we just came up short trying to do it a different way. So,
Chris, Ant said last night he's probably more focused on getting his body right this offseason than maybe the basketball stuff. What do you guys see as his offseason goals?
I think that's 100% right. I mean, what his body's been through this year, I think it's completely new for him. I think it's been eye-opening for him in the sense that I think he realizes how fragile sometimes these things can be. 100% health is going to be absolutely key for him, and there's going to be skill pieces to his game that he's going to always want to add or polish. But for me, it's it's more about his approach and how he sees himself coming into the season and what the team really needs from him, which is he has all the game that he needs. Like right now, if he doesn't add a single thing to his game, he's still going to be a phenomenal player in this league. And so it's really about the intangibles right now for me with him.
This trade deadline, you picked up Io.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the young guys that truly became a star in the postseason. He's an unrestricted free agent this offseason. Do you hope to see a future with him here in Minnesota?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's a question, obviously, more the business side for Tim and his crew, but we love what he brought to us. He fits in perfectly in so many ways, and we're hopeful that he's here. So.
These last 3 years have been as successful as any in franchise history. Is there a moment or a game or an aspect of the team that stands out most?
Over the last 3 years, I don't know if I don't know if there's a specific moment. I can't really think of one right now. I think when you've had success and you want to keep building on it, you think about the kind of the stumbling blocks a little bit more than the high points, but certainly proud of what we've been able to make of the franchise. But we got a long way to go, but we certainly have, I think, a good foundation to do so.
Chris, we talked a little bit about this during the season, but the overall kind of Ant Julius partnership, and it's kind of maybe up and down at different points with Ant having the shifting role. Just how would you evaluate that this season, and how Julius and Ant kind of work together with Ant's new kind of role?
Yeah, I think I hope that it would be a little bit better. I don't think there's any. There's no basketball reason why we shouldn't be able to be a little better there. I think they kind of both play in the same rhythm, so I feel like they kind of feel like it's they maybe your turn, my turn a bit, rather than having a like a two-man game such as Denver has with Murray and Jokic. But they both, can have the ability to create for each other, which I think came and went at times. I think it could have been a little bit more consistent. I don't think it's a bad fit. I just feel like, maybe as a coaching staff, we didn't do a good enough job of teasing it out of them in the ways that we could have. Looking back, and that goes to John's question about maybe, tweaking some things offensively, how we do stuff. But yeah, they both kind of play. They're fairly ball dominant. They like to create a lot of their own offense, and that sometimes makes it a bit of a tough partnership, just because you got to remember to also have that ability to keep the music playing, as we like to say, keep the ball moving. So.
Chris Ann said you guys might not have established all the right habits you
Yeah.
needed during the regular season. I know you've lamented that at various points in the year. Do you feel like, I know guys talked about being bored and whatnot, but do you feel like from last year's West Finals and this series right here that you're kind of armed with the reasoning for why that needs to take place,
doubt.
and maybe can't accept some of the things that they've kind of, the approaches they've taken?
Yeah, I think no doubt about it. I think that's on us. It's on me. We've got to we've got to meet these standards better. I think it all comes down to discipline right now. Whether you're undermanned or have matchup issues or whatever it might be in the playoffs, it's like the discipline to execute the things that you need to do is way more important in the playoffs, of course. So, and at times, our discipline came and went. It was the same thing, and it's the same thing against Oklahoma City. We feel pretty comfortable. We know where we're going to get our shots. We just have to be a little bit more disciplined to keep making the plays that are going to lead to those shots, and that's something that we don't consistently do. That's just one example of it, and this series was not too different, and I thought as the series was unfolding, if we go down, we're going to go down for the same reason we went down a year ago. So.
Chris, you've had one season now with Mark and Alex as the new owners. What was this season like getting to learn them, and how do you expect things to operate going into a big summer here as you try to make up ground?
Well, fortunately, we have existing relationships which are super healthy. Nothing but great support by them. I think for them, their first year of real control and ownership, was probably a little bit eye-opening. Just kind of all the decisions that were to be made were theirs and theirs alone, with the consequences of what they decide. But it was fine. It was great, and look forward to, I think, going from strength to strength with that partnership, because now that they have a little bit of a feel of how things work and how they might want them to work, the conversations that we're having are a little more forward thinking, and just kind of less about, kind of learning the ropes, if you will. So, always appreciative of their support. We got great relationships in the building. Tim, myself, and them, it's kind of unique. I don't think I've been in an organization where there's that much communication between all three key stakeholders. So, in that sets us up well for a really good summer. So.